So these notes are on inequalities. We're going to start by just reviewing how to graph an inequality. If there's a line under the inequality, you will shade in the circle. Here's what I mean. Inequalities could look like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. Those are your 4 inequalities that we're going to be working with. If they have a line under it, like these first 2, then when you draw your circle, you're going to shade it in. If they do not have a line under it, then when you draw your circle, you're going to leave it open. Okay? I would write that down somewhere. You're going to need to somehow remember, if it has the line under it, you shade it in. If it doesn't have the line, we leave it open. Also, whichever way the arrow points, that's the direction you're going to color. But there is a rule. You have to make sure that the X is on the left side. So let me give you an example. Write down number 1. I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. Now, is the X on the left-hand side? It sure is. So we can just go straight into graphing. My number is at -8. And there's 2 things we got to remember. When I do my circle, am I going to leave it open or am I going to shade it in? And that's what you just wrote down. Because there is no line here, that means we're going to leave it open. And then what I like to do is I like to turn my inequality into an arrow. And when you turn it into an arrow, it shows you which way to shade. That arrow points to the right, so I'm going to shade to the right. So that's how you would graph number 1. Let's do number 2, write that down. First thing to do, make sure X is on the left-hand side. It is not. So I'm going to flip these. I'm going to put the X first and the 5 second. That's perfectly fine. You can flip these and just move them to the opposite sides. But the rule is, if you flip the X and the 5, you also have to flip your inequality. Okay? So let's graph this now. It is at the number 5. We're going to draw a circle. Should I shade my circle in? Yes, because it has this line under it, that means I'm going to shade in my circle. And then to figure out which way to shade, I make it an arrow, and it points to the right, which means I'm going to shade to the right. All right, let's do another one. Is the X on the left side? No, but I can flip them. I can flip the X and the 2. When I flip the X and the 2, I'm also going to flip the inequality. So let's graph it. It is at 2. We are going to draw a circle. Should I shade that circle in? No, because there is no line under that inequality. I'm going to make this into an arrow. And which way does that arrow point? To the left, which means I shade to the left. So that's example 3. All right, example 4. What happens if it's not solved, right? This is pretty easy. We're going to go through this. So if it's not solved, it's going to work just like an equation. Okay, we're going to solve it. So just like an equation, I'm going to draw a line through here. I want to get X by itself. So I need to move this 9. And the opposite of plus 9 is minus 9. So my 9's go away. Now, big mistake. Do not bring down an equal sign. You bring down the inequality. Okay, this is not an equation. This is an inequality. And then 15 minus 9 is 6. So let's graph it. It is at 6. I'm going to put a circle. Should I shade it in or leave it open? You should leave it open because there is no line under it. And then if I turn that into an arrow, it points to the left, which means I would shade to the left. All right, let's do another one. Let's do example 5. Same thing, I want to get D by itself. So I need to move my 3. The opposite of subtracting is adding. I'm going to bring down D. I'm going to bring down an inequality. -6 plus 3 is negative 3. So I'm going to graph it. I'm going to do a circle. Should I leave it open? Yes, because there is no line under it. And if I turn this into an arrow, it points to the right, which means I shade to the right. All right, let's do another one. Write down example 6. I want to get n by itself, so I need to move 0.4. The opposite of subtracting is adding. So 0.7 plus 0.4 is 1.1. Bring down the inequality, not an equal sign, and an n. Now, what's wrong with this? Hopefully you can read the very first sentence up top and understand. The variable must be on the left-hand side. So we've done some like this. I'm allowed to flip them, right? I can flip those. But if you flip your n and your 1.1, then you also flip your inequality. So let's graph that. There's two ways you can see this graph. 1.1 is in between 1 and 2, right? And it's really close to 1, so I'm going to do a circle right here. Should I leave it open or shade it in? Hopefully you see you should shade it in because it has that line underneath it. And if I turn this into an arrow, it points to the left. I am also fine with you just doing 1.1. It's a closed circle, shaded to the left. But I want you to see that both ways are correct. Okay, if you just want to show me it's at 1.1, I'm fine with that. If you want to show me that 1.1 is in between 1 and 2, I'm fine with that. Okay, let's do example 7. Draw my line. I want to get x by itself. So I'm going to move my 5. The opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Now what's wrong with that answer? The x is on the wrong side. So I can flip them. I can put x first and negative 3 last. And if you flip them, then you also flip your inequality. So let's graph it. It is at negative 3. I should put a circle there. I'm going to leave it open because there is no line underneath it. If I turn this into an arrow, it points to the right. So I'm going to shade to the right. Okay, let's do some multiplying and dividing. It works the same way. I'm going to draw my line. I want to get x by itself. These are multiplying. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. I'm going to divide by 3. Well, let me write it underneath. So I have x. I'm going to bring down my inequality. Negative 27 divided by 3 is negative 9. So it's at negative 9. It's going to be an open circle because there's no line under it. If I turned it into an arrow, it goes to the right. All right, let's look at example 9. 2/3. If they're right beside each other, they're multiplying. So I'm going to divide by 2/3. So I have r. I'm going to bring down my inequality. All right, grab your calculators because I want you to type this in with me. All right, so I'm typing this in. 6 divided by. On the notes in the last unit we did, I told you how to type a fraction in. To type a fraction in, you have to put it in parentheses. So when I type in 2/3, look at how I typed it in. 6 divided by 2/3, and hit enter. And you get 9. 6 divided by 2/3 is 9. So it's going to be at 9. Put your circle. It's not shaded in because there is no line underneath it. And if you make this an arrow, it goes to the left. So we shade to the left. Now there is one special rule that we have to remember. If you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip your inequality. So let's do example 10. I'm going to show you what I mean. The negative 8 and the x are multiplying. So to move it, I'm going to divide by negative 8. Right? So on the left-hand side, these cancel. I got an x. 72 divided by negative 8 is negative 9. I divided by a negative. You divide by a negative, you have to flip your inequality. So look at those inequalities. Do you see how I flipped it? And then it works the same way. I'm not going to keep graphing because I think you get the hang of that. But you have to remember, if you multiply or divide by a negative, flip your inequality. Let's do another one. Let's do example 11. I'm going to slide these down. So, example 11. I want to get x by itself. So I need to move that 5. Well, it's dividing. And the opposite of dividing is multiply. So I'm going to multiply by negative 5. I'm going to multiply by negative 5. So these cancel and I have x. Negative 5 times negative 3 is a positive 15. But I divided by a negative, or multiplied, sorry, I multiplied by a negative. And your rule is, if you divide or multiply by a negative, you have to flip this inequality. Now, we're not done. Does anyone see why we are not done? Hopefully, you see the x is on the wrong side. So I'm going to flip my x and my 15. And remember, when you flip those, you also flip your inequality. Okay? So that's example 11. Let's do example 12. I want to move that 2 because the 2 is with the d. So I'm going to multiply by 2. I'm going to multiply by 2. Let's type this in our calculators. 2 times negative 1/2. 2 times. I always like to put fractions in parentheses. That way you'll always, whoops, you'll always get it right if you put every fraction in a parentheses. 2 times negative 1/2 is negative 1. I'm going to bring my d down. Now, did I multiply by a negative? No. I multiplied by 2. Okay? It doesn't matter that the 1/2 was a negative. All that matters is what you multiplied by. So I multiplied by positive 2. So do not flip that inequality. Okay? I multiplied by 2, not negative 2. So don't flip it. Now, what's wrong with this answer? What's wrong with this answer is that the d is on the wrong side. So now, in my final step, this is where I'm going to flip it. So I'm going to put the d on the left side, the negative 1 on the right side, and now I'm going to flip it. So that's your final answer for 12. 13. Hopefully you remember, if there is no number, it's really a 1. So I'm going to make that a negative 1x. Okay? They are multiplying negative 1 and x. So to move the negative 1, I'm going to divide by negative 1. My negative 1's cancel. So I have negative 2 and an x. Did I multiply or divide by a negative? Yes, I divided by negative 1. So flip your inequality. Now what's wrong with this answer? Well, your x is on the wrong side. So I'm going to flip my x and my negative 2. And when I flip those, I also flip my inequality. And that's my final answer for 13. So if you would go try 3.1, Graphing Inequalities worksheet, and let me know if you need help.